Hey, just imagine that instead of saying what I'm saying now, I was talking about your business, or perhaps you were talking about your business. You can advertise on About Basingstoke's podcast network for less than you might think. Just email info@aboutbasingstoke.com to find out more. About Basingstoke is Basingstoke's podcast network, proudly supported by IncuHive, the place to be for startups and small businesses. With virtual offices, desk space, offices and meeting rooms now open at Brunel House, Stevenson Road, Hound Mills, Basingstoke. Visit incuhive.co.uk.
About Basingstoke.
Hi, and welcome back to You Are Not Alone, Conversations for Mental Health and Wellbeing. I'm Marie, and I'm so glad you're here. Over the past couple of episodes, we've talked about overwhelm, and we've talked about high-functioning anxiety. Today's conversation feels like a natural follow-on from both of those. We're talking about the pressure to cope. And I'm not talking here about resilience, not talking about strength. I'm talking about that feeling that somehow we're expected to keep going, no matter what. To put on a brave face, carry on, to hold everything together, even when life is feeling incredibly hard. And I think many of us have heard phrases like, "You've just got to get on with it." Others have it worse. "You'll be fine, you'll be all right, just keep going." And while those comments can be well-intentioned, they can reinforce the message that struggling just isn't acceptable. We should be coping better, and that asking for help somehow means we've failed. Yet the reality is that life can be difficult, and sometimes feeling pressure to appear okay can become a burden in itself. I think it's worth asking a really important question. Why do so many of us feel this pressure in the first place? I think partly it comes from messages we've received throughout our lives. Maybe we grew up hearing things like, "Don't make a fuss, just be strong, just get on with it." And perhaps we've learnt that being helpful is valuable. Being dependable is admirable. And we like to feel needed. Being independent is something to be very proud of. The trouble with that is that somewhere along the way, we might begin to believe that needing support is the opposite of those things. That asking for help means we're not strong. That struggling somehow means failing. And that resting means we're lazy. And of course, none of those things are true. Then there's the wider world around us. So many of us are carrying worries about work, finances, health, family, the people we care about, the future, national and global events. And before we know it, we're trying to hold absolutely everything at once, by ourselves. So no wonder so many people are feeling exhausted. I'd like you to imagine for a moment that everyone is carrying a rucksack. You can't see it, but it's there. And every difficult experience adds something to it. Stress at work, relationship difficulties and challenges, financial pressures, caring responsibilities, health concerns, loss, uncertainty. Over time, that rucksack can become really heavy. But the problem is that we spend so much time looking at how people appear on the outside that we forget we have no idea what's in their rucksack. And often we're doing the same thing to ourselves. We're comparing our internal reality with someone else's external appearance. And then we wonder why we're finding things hard. The truth is, most people are carrying much more than we realise. They're just carrying it quietly. One of the most helpful ideas I've come across is something called circles of control. So I'd like you to imagine 3 circles. The smallest circle in the middle is your circle of control. And these are the things that you can directly influence. Your actions, your choices, your attitude, and your boundaries. Also in there is who you ask for support and how you spend your time. The next circle, so slightly bigger, is your circle of influence. These are things that you can influence but not completely control. So your relationships, your workplace, projects you're involved in. You can contribute and you have an impact, but you can't guarantee the outcome of these things on your own. And then there's the largest circle, the circle of concern. These are things you care about, but you cannot directly control. World events, the economy, decisions made by other people. Things that have already happened and things that may never happen. But here's what often happens when we're under pressure. We spend huge amounts of our emotional energy in that circle of concern, worrying, replaying, and predicting. Trying to solve things that are impossible for one person to solve. So one question that's really helpful is, which circle am I in right now? Am I focusing on something I can control? Am I focusing on something I can influence? Or am I focusing on something that is completely outside of my control? Because if we can bring our attention back to the things we can actually do, life often feels a little bit more manageable. I think one thing that's important to understand is that coping isn't a simple yes or no question. We're often asked, are you coping? As though there's only 2 possible answers, yes or no. But real life is much more complicated than that. Sometimes we're coping at work, but we're struggling at home. Sometimes we're coping during the day, but lying awake at night. Sometimes we're managing the practical things whilst feeling emotionally exhausted. You can be doing things, you can be getting things done, and you can still need support. You can be succeeding and yet still struggling, and you can be smiling and still be finding things hard. I think many of us become incredibly good at wearing the "I've got this" mask. So we put it on for work, we put it on in meetings, we put it on at school gates, we put it on in social situations. And after a while, wearing that mask becomes automatic. The challenge is that if nobody sees behind the mask, nobody knows we might need support. And sometimes the strongest thing we can do isn't just carrying on. Sometimes it's allowing someone to see that things aren't quite okay. Not everybody, not all at once, just one person. Someone who makes us feel safe enough to be honest. Because honesty creates those opportunities for connection, and connection is where support begins. There is a myth that might sound familiar. The myth of, I don't want to be a burden. So one phrase that I hear a lot is, I don't want to burden anyone. Maybe you've said it. I know I have. And whilst that comes from a place of kindness and care, it's worth challenging. So here's the challenge. Think about somebody you care about. A friend, a loved one, a family member, a colleague. If they came to you and said, I'm actually having a really difficult time, would your first thought be, oh, what a burden? No, absolutely not. Actually, you'd want to listen. You'd want to support them. You'd want to help if you could, and to let them know they're not alone. But we offer ourselves much less compassion than we offer everyone else. So what if those people who care about you feel exactly the same way? What if allowing someone in isn't being a burden, but it's giving somebody an opportunity to show they care about you? So what would happen if we gave ourselves permission to do that, and permission to be human? Permission to have bad days, to need help, to not have all those answers, and even permission to get things wrong. Permission to say, I'm finding this difficult. Because being human is not weakness, and it's something we all share. And there's enormous strength in recognising that and in recognising our limits, because we're not giving up, but we're acknowledging reality, and we were never meant to carry everything by ourselves, on our own. So as always in these episodes, I want to highlight some organisations that are making a difference in our community. So the first one is Cruise Bereavement Support. Sometimes pressure to cope comes from carrying a loss of grief. Grief and bereavement affects everyone differently. Can it impact our sleep, our concentration, our health and well-being, our relationships and our confidence? Yet many people feel pressure just to return to normal, keep going and manage their grief quietly and by themselves. Cruise is the UK's leading bereavement charity, supporting people after the death of someone important in their lives. They offer bereavement support, information and guidance through local services, trained volunteers and a national helpline. Support is available for adults, children and young people. So if grief is something you are navigating right now, please know you don't have to do that alone. Their website is www.cruise, and that's spelled cruse.org.uk, and their national helpline number is 0808 808 1677. The second organisation I'd like to highlight is Natural Basingstoke. When we're feeling pressure, our world can become very small. We become focused only on those responsibilities, deadlines, problems, and the things that we need to fix. And one thing that can really help with that is reconnecting with nature, with community and with the world around us. Natural Basingstoke is a local charity supporting community-led nature conservation throughout Basingstoke and Deane. They work with volunteers, conservation groups, local authorities and community partners to protect and enhance local green spaces whilst creating opportunities for people to get involved. And what I particularly like about their work is that it reminds us that well-being doesn't always happen indoors. Sometimes it starts with fresh air and a purpose, and being part of something larger than ourselves. And there are lots of opportunities for local people to get involved. So their website is www.naturalbasingstoke.org.uk, and you can find all their contact information on there. So whether it's talking through grief with Cruise or connecting with others through nature and community actions, both of these organisations remind us of something important. Coping doesn't have to mean coping alone. And as always, I'm going to leave you with one thing to try this week. So this week, I'd like you to grab a piece of paper and draw 3 circles. Label them. So the smallest one in the middle, remember, is control. The one in the middle, outside of that, is influence. And then the largest one is concern. And then think about one thing that's weighing on your mind right now and place it in the circle where it belongs, and be really honest with yourself about where you place it. If it is outside of your control, what happens if you stop expecting yourself to fix it? If it's within your influence, what's one small action you could take? If it's within your control, what's the very next step? because sometimes the pressure to cope comes from carrying responsibilities that were never ours to carry in the first place. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of You Are Not Alone. Today we've talked about the pressure to cope, where it comes from, why we feel it, and why coping isn't simply a choice between managing and not managing. Yes and no. We've explored circles of control and the invisible rucksacks that people carry, and the importance of recognising we don't have to solve everything. If today's conversation has resonated with you, please remember that support is always available. Talk to someone you trust, speak to your GP, or reach out to those organisations that I've talked about today. And if you need urgent emotional support, Samaritans are available 24 hours a day on 116 123. In the next episode, I'm going to be talking about putting our phones down. Until then, be kind to yourself. Focus on what you can control. Let go of what you can't. And remember, you are not alone.
If you've been thinking about podcasting for your business or something else that you're passionate about Basingstoke gives you not only the platform, but also the professional support you need to make it happen. Find out more at aboutbasingstoke.com or email info@aboutbasingstoke.com.
Basingstoke.